Chief Executive Officer of Free Energy Limited Group. Enyo has 30 years of international experience, of which 23 years specifically in the oil and gas sector, with focus on the strategy and performance improvement. Part of his experience is 10 years with Shell. He was an executive director with Shell Global Solutions, focusing on the third-party and joint venture businesses of Shell globally, in addition to being chairman of Shell Services Italy and board of member of Shell Italy.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished friends and colleagues. I want to thank NIOC through Dr. Degan for having me here. It is a double challenge for me because I'm the last speaker before lunch. That's always a challenge. And my topic is not going to be technical at all. So if that is going to be cumbersome for you, I apologize to start with. I'm truly honored to be here, and I would like to share some thoughts on what I believe are potentially enablers, because we have heard a lot about technologies, about developments of fields, about potential in the near future, but what we have not heard so much is how all of this is going to roll out, considering the challenges that we face in Iran. And I'm not talking about the fact that the resources are there, because clearly yesterday and today it has been made very clear that that's no challenge whatsoever. So I would like to share with you what we at ILF see as the critical success factors for having Iran back on track with the project in the energy sector in general and the oil and gas sector more specifically. Any reflection on data and data sharing is based on ILF's own research and information. And we are a private company, completely 100% privately held, so you cannot buy shares even if you would want that. So let me start by stating that a new era has begun for Iran's economy. Isolated from the West and operating in relative isolation, Iran is now realigning with the global economy following the lifting of the international sanctions in January 2016. The sanctions in a direct and an indirect way had a devastating impact on Iran's oil and gas industry and severely hampered the country's ability to convert its hydrocarbon resources into economic value. As a consequence, for example, following the intensified sanctions in 2012, Iran's oil production fell dramatically from almost 3.7 barrels per day in 2011 to 2.7 million barrels a day in 2012. The further intensification of the sanctions by the US prevented numerous countries and companies from engaging with Iran, virtually hibernating the country's oil and gas industry. Emerging from the sanctions era, Iran has a number of globally competitive and unrivaled key strengths, which should allow for accelerated growth. To my opinion, these key strengths are a history of scientific education. Iran has the richest history of scientific education in any country of the world, with the exception of the older part of Europe. Iran has a very diversified economy, favorable demographics, and urbanization with a young and very eager workforce, an increasing internal buying power, and also a culture of entrepreneurship, a wealth of natural resources, and then, last but not least, Iran's geographic location between the East and West, which all could contribute to Iran's future prosperity. In addition to Iran's very substantial oil and gas reserves, which are the fundamental engines to growth, the country's other key industrial sectors are petrochemical and mining, tourism, IT, banking, insurance, and professional services. Why do I mention these as well in a forum like this? These sectors are also key in the peripheral of the oil and gas industry, given that the proper functioning of these sectors would smoothen the accelerated development of the energy sector, specifically oil and gas. The much-awaited lifting of the sanctions on Iran has triggered interest from various international companies in Iran's oil and gas industries. Given that OPEC member Iran has the world's second largest gas reserve and is fourth on the global list of top oil reserves. Iran today is able, albeit with a challenge, to which I will come back later, to attract considerable foreign investments and reactivate its dormant assets, greenfield and semi-brownfields. Semi, as many plants have been projected and are in various project stages of development. It is estimated that currently roughly 40 billion worth of oil and gas projects are out on tender, with an additional 145 billion worth, US dollars I'm talking about, of projects to be signed on by 2020. While these developments look promising, there is a genuine concern among the industry leaders, such as IOCs and service companies, in connection with the sustainability of this new industrial turn, especially in the light of the challenging geopolitical volatility in the Middle East and the adjacent regions. This is not the only concern in my view. In general, Iran, and specifically the Iranian oil and gas sector, had real difficulties to raise finance from the international financial institutions, such as banks, private equity, and venture capitalists, who are expected to remain reluctant, even now after the sanctions and despite the way up. This has to do with potential legal challenges, both locally in Iran as well as in perspective of international trade, as some of the barriers still keep up. I will mention a little bit about that later. Today, Iran is experiencing economic stagnation of some kind and is in serious need of economic stimulus. We're generating a new approach to attracting investment from international oil companies, IOCs, is critical. Iran needs to take a business approach that is in tune with the interests of both Iran and IOCs. Among others, the participation of a wide range of IOCs in the projects to be offered under the new and more attractive international petroleum contracts, IPCs, is really a step in the right direction, as the IPC addresses many of the concerns that IOCs had regarding the buyback contract in a bid to incentivize foreign investment and pull in the much-needed know-how and technology. In addition, there are the enormous reserves yet to be explored in the Caspian Sea. And as mentioned before, Iran has one of the world's largest proven natural gas reserves as we see it, still underdeveloped because of the sanctions. Iran has a high success rate in natural gas exploration at 79% compared to 30–35% for most other gas-rich nations. Exploration, however, is not the key priority, given that the country is home to a large number of undeveloped and untapped known reserves. Similar to the oil sector, the gas sector has been equally severed by sanctions, but has the potential now to grow significantly, particularly as the South Pars offshore gas fields located at the center of the Persian Gulf are now producing. This will significantly increase Iran's gas production and could well make Iran the world's leading gas exporter. However, the infrastructure and know-how required to tap into and exploit the reserves are underdeveloped. Significant investment is therefore required to modernize technologies and operational mechanisms to enable the country to compete with other sophisticated players in the oil and gas market, particularly with the oil price down at a 10-year low. The first significant step of development of the Iranian oil and gas industry was taken a year ago. Iranian assets in the world released and becoming available again to Iran. A lot of these assets will be deployed to boost Iran's oil and gas industry, jointly with foreign investments to upgrade technology and capital injections for reanimating hibernating fields. For instance, by upgrading technologies, of which we have heard something today, equipment and modus operandi. Industry analysts have predicted that Iran will achieve sizable increases in both oil and gas production, but that its targets will be easier to reach in a timely and efficient manner with foreign investment and the latest technology. Yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, we heard His Excellency Mr. Ali Kardor, the chairman of NIOC, sharing and confirming the ambitious development plans across all streams. And I think the 5-year plan, with all its details as we have heard it, is an important foundation for acceleration of the sustainable development and materializing of the economic value for Iran. The question is, though, it's not just the what, but it's also the how. And that's equally important. And what, to my opinion, are the three critical success factors allowing Iran to catch up with the development of the projects and provide the Iranian economy with a much needed impulse. First, there is technology and know-how. Second, lower barriers to entry for foreign companies and partners. And three, financing capability. Allow me to zoom in a little bit on all three of them. Technology and know-how. As a consequence of the sanctions, technological developments in Iran are lagging behind other hydrocarbon-producing countries and companies. Despite a high intellect and the ability to grasp new concepts and technology fast by the Iranian engineering sector, the inflow of new technology and know-how is for now related to parties who partner with Iranian companies and enter with both technical capability and project funding. The pace in which technological update of the industry takes place depends highly on this type of partnership, which, as it is now, slows down the speed of enriching the know-how in Iran. It would be recommended, therefore, for Iranian companies to also look for foreign companies as consultants and providing them with the necessary updates and guidance and transfer knowledge. Since in general, Iranian oil and gas companies are very focused on the financial and client partner deals, this element is generally not considered as a stand-alone approach. Second, lower barriers to entry for foreign companies and partners. Re-emerging from the sanctions, there are new perspectives to business risks for foreign companies in relation to investing and working with Iran. Not in the hand of Iran is that most European oil majors and oil service companies are cautious, as their compliance departments will want to first see sanctions being fully removed before any material work can start on projects. In particular, the following items are considered risks: sanctions that remain in place, trade regulations and exports controls, and to ensure that all trade activity is sanction compliant. Political exposure via connections with current or former government organizations or individuals that remain sanctions. Iran is a highly centralized country, and the government regulates nearly all activities. Basic requests can require complex forms, administrative processes, and stamps of approval, and these can lead to delays, especially in the procurement of services and goods from foreign companies. Formal requirements to establish a company in Iran is often experienced as a cumbersome process, which, even if the reality is a lot better, little is done to mitigate the perception on the international stage, let alone marketing Iran as a country to invest in. A small recommendation here would be that if Iran would market the country as a good place to invest in other countries, that would be really beneficial. Certainty of law. Iranian law allows for the freedom of choice of law only in circumstances where the contractual agreement was signed outside of Iran. If a contract is signed in Iran, Iranian law applies. If the contract between an Iranian and a foreign national includes an arbitration clause, the law chosen by the contracting parties will be recognized. Non-Iranian companies can choose to resolve disputes through the courts of Iran, arbitration, or the courts of another jurisdiction, of course if the contract was signed abroad. While subjectively this setup should provide sufficient sense of certainty and legal risk mitigation in the perception of foreign companies, and this is what we talk about, applied Iranian law in contract risk is, in case of dispute, more so than having agreed on arbitration on any of the European jurisdictions. Finally, on this one, lack of perceived transparency in the decision-making process of Iranian companies when developing projects with potential foreign partners is considered a risk as well. Now let's go to the financing part of this. The overall financing requirements of oil and gas projects would mount up to 280 billion USD or equivalent of investments to its upstream and downstream sectors, which would account for about 200 billion USD and 80 billion USD for the petrochemical projects. This is part of the ambitious 5-year development plan that is set to conclude in March 21 and 25 for the petrochemical projects. According to various reports, and I can tell you I've read most of them, over the last 12 months, Iran aims at bringing in roughly 120 billion from foreign partners. So, on what does this ability to finance depend? The ability to attract foreign companies to Iran to partner with Iranian oil and gas companies. This highly depends on the factor mentioned before, and also the ability to collateralize future offtake, which again relates to certainty to title, and furthermore how the US moves in connection with the sanctions and the deal closed under the previous administration. We all know that this is a bit of a very uncertain situation on the one hand. On the other side, there is sufficient common sense in the minds of the decision makers not to disrupt what we currently got in place. At least this is my belief, and let's see if that works out. The ability to collateralize sovereign guarantees, which also require the full insertion in the global banking system, and we are not there yet. Although Iran's financial sector is offering opportunities for cooperation between domestic banks and foreign banks, which is considered the key condition to increase the financing options for projects in Iran, we are not there yet. And if the political and market will is there to address the previous mentioned points, the Iranian proposition will be a win-win opportunity, just to share a well-known cliché. Okay, so I have to cut a little bit, but I come down to the gist now. So how to come to a successful business strategy, organizational structure, and efficient use of skills and expertise. In my view, the first step is made in the legislation connection with the IPC. Although there is still room for interpretation, to some extent for improvement, it provides the basis of international cooperation with IOCs. The second step is horizontal. Not a centralized command for change, an overhaul and revamp of the processes and issues as described before, but to identify a pace-setting, state-owned company of substance who would be the champion of revised and efficient business and management processes. This pace-setting company should be allowed to modernize and overhaul their processes in accordance with the world's best-in-class practices, adapting as much as possible to the Iranian culture, high intellect, and faith. This would mean analyzing the decision-making process from strategy to acquiring pens and pencils, designing the improvements, and creating buy-in at the senior levels of government and management, and sequentially implement these processes within the company, followed by others eventually. Yes, I stop here. Yes. No, I'm done. So I thank you for your attention, and I understand that we are all a little bit under stomach pressure, and I hope I did sufficient to make you think a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emil, for the holistic review and analysis and Iran's commercial and economic conditions with specific institutions and comments for the Iranian industry to meet business requirements. We can have 5 minutes for questions and answers. Questions from the audience, if there is any questions from and I have to thank our panel. There is some announcement happening here. The closing ceremony will be at 3:30 p.m. With the speakers from Ipec and IEF, and also His Excellency Mr. the Deputy Minister of Petroleum, Engineering, Research and Development. So I would like to invite all of you to attend this ceremony. The speeches will be delivered and hope to see you soon on other occasions. Thank you so much and goodbye.